1, 2, 3, 4. If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Hey!
Hi, Claire.
Teresa.
I'm going to tell everyone that you are wearing your purple shirt again. It's the most beautiful purple shirt ever. It looks like it has beet greens on it. Is that what's happening there?
All right, well, we'll talk about the shirt now. I will fully tell everyone about the shirt. So first, I just want to say what I said to you privately, which is I have indeed worn other things in between last episode and this episode.
So you claim.
Yeah, I have not fully become a cartoon character that wears the same clothes in every episode. This is a shirt from a farm called Roots and Refuge Farm. It has a hand holding beets and carrots and parsnips, and it says, "Real food comes dirty." Roots and Refuge Farm is a YouTube channel run by a woman named Jess Sowards, and it's her husband and her kids, and they have a little homestead in central Arkansas, and they do YouTube videos about gardening, and she's an amazing gardener and a wonderful human being. Of course, I don't know her, but I love her, and I bought a damn t-shirt from her because I wanted to support her and because it's the softest, prettiest t-shirt.
And it's perfectly your color, as we've discussed before.
This is true.
All good things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, It Chooses You. I am Claire Patton.
And I am Teresa Sparks, who did not talk over Claire this week.
Professional as fuck. That's all you need to know about us.
We talk about things we like and that we hope you like too. Welcome.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and download our episodes if you enjoy this. It helps us spread the word to other like-minded, awesome people like you.
Woo-hoo.
We were checking in a little bit before we started recording. Sorry, everybody.
You don't get to hear it all. But then we're just going to tell you all the best parts, so.
You were saying you've been feeling a little scattered. I've been feeling a little scattered. What the heck is going on?
Something's happening. Something's up.
I think you and I were both 10 minutes before recording, still finishing our episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not typical. Usually we tend to have our shit together a little more than that.
We so have our shit together at 99.9% of the time, everybody.
So we know that I am doing 2 master's degrees and I am working full time and I am producing this podcast with you, my dear friend Claire. So my life is full of stuff. It's all awesome stuff that I like, but it's just very full of stuff. And I am a person who requires what I consider to be a larger number of hours staring at the wall in silence than other people require.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really had that. And so I feel like I'm going a little crazy. But thankfully, my roommate is spending the next 4 or 5 days at a friend's house because the friend and his partner are out of town. And so I am here in the apartment by myself with my dogs for the first time in 7 years. And turns out Teresa really likes living alone.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
My cousin, who owns this house and therefore lives in this house with us, is also leaving for 4 to 5 days this week. So party time.
A lone party. The best kind of party.
That is the introvert's battle cry right there.
That's right. Let's have an alone party. I talk out loud to myself more than people who don't do that would think is sane. Right? And it's very important to me. And when I don't do it, I feel truncated. I feel like I'm not, like there's something missing when I don't get to do it. And of course, when my roommate is here, I curtail that desire because it's very off-putting to live with someone who mutters constantly to herself. I understand how it is from the outside.
When you mutter to yourself, I know you're very aware of this behavior. What do you think is happening? Is it your inner writer? Are you processing things? Are you in touch with your multiple personas? You know, the different facets of your personality? Is it a dialogue? What's the deal there? Because you talk about it a lot and I don't do it that often. So I'm curious about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a slight compulsion, I would say, to reorder the events of my life into narrative at all times. But it is processing. So this is what's happening. How do I feel about it? Am I happy with what's happening? Do I want to change direction? How should I change direction? What direction should I go in? Like all of those things constantly reconfiguring. I feel like a lot of my time is spent navigating my own desires. And I don't know if other people experience that, please let us know, because it's kind of lonely to think I'm the only person in the world that handles it this way. But like, I haven't been in therapy, but I haven't been in therapy because I decided I didn't like my therapist. She annoyed me.
And we know there's no other therapists out there. I say this, full disclosure, as a person who does not go to therapy.
I stopped seeing my therapist because she made me angry, but she made me angry not about something that I need to work on, in my opinion. She made me angry because she legit didn't fucking understand what I was telling her. And I was like, okay, you might be too stupid to be my therapist. I'm sorry. This might be over. Because I understand that I need to identify my feelings and, like, have the feelings and, you know, not pathologize them and all of those things. So my therapist annoyed me, and I didn't go back to see her, and haven't really done that. So a lot of it is like I'm self-therapizing. I'm talking out loud and self-therapizing.
When it comes to therapy, you really don't want the B team.
No. You don't want someone that you're concerned might not have understood all the words you just used.
Right.
Also, some of them insist that it doesn't, that sort of intellectual ability isn't relevant to the process of therapy, which is incorrect.
It's Freud or no one for you. You'll accept no less.
I don't know if that's true, but I like it. I like it a lot.
It may not be true, but...
It's so funny. It's so good. So anyway, the talking out loud is at least partially that. But also, like, I entertain myself. I have lots of thoughts about every single thing that happens, and nobody wants to listen to me talk about all of that shit all the time.
Your brain is working lightning fast.
All the time, and it's no fun for other people unless I edit it a little bit.
I don't talk to myself like that. But here's what I do.
What do you do?
I create transitions for myself verbally. Just like you're muttering, it's completely unintentional. It just happens. So I do a lot of sighing. And I do a lot of, okay. And that's just me marking that I'm moving to the next thing. My cousin and I were talking about it because she does it too. She's had professional situations in which that was interpreted as a bad attitude. And she and I had this conversation where we talked about, I was like, no, I get it. You're just transitioning. And she was like, exactly. But it kind of comes with a breath. So, you know, it can seem like you're so put upon or something like that.
I have had more than one person ask me why I was sighing at them so loudly. And I was like, oh, that's not about you, honey.
Yeah. That's all in here, baby.
That's right. That's all happening inside.
My mom did it a lot as well. So it annoys me a little bit. She did a lot of sighing, and she'd sometimes just go, oh, Jesus. And I'm like, what could you possibly need to talk to Jesus about? What is happening between the living room and the bathroom that you've got to discuss it with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?
I like this contrast that we've discovered between us, that you are very focused on transitions, whereas I am focused in, like, what's happening right now. I feel like the transitions happen to me, whereas you are making them, and I like that very much.
Yeah.
I like that very much.
Speaking of transitions, what are we talking about today, Teresa?
I think you are a genius is what we're talking about. No, I'm going to tell you a story about a powerful woman in history that I have only 2 degrees of separation from.
Yeah.
You and I have spoken about women during Prohibition, the Prohibition era in the United States before, from the other side. I told you about Carrie Nation and her smashers, her chopping axe.
Oh my goodness, Carrie.
So this is a hero story told from the other side of that equation about a woman who completely defied convention and became one of the most feared and revered rum runners of the Prohibition era. This week I am giving you Gertrude Cleo Lythgoe, Queen of the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So my sources this week, I have many. All of the sources I found are basically pulled from her autobiography. That's the real source here. So her autobiography is called The Bahama Queen, Prohibition's Daring Beauty.
I love that the main source is her.
Yes.
That's so rare.
Every article I found is basically just a few snippets from her autobiography written into an article. And that's fine, because that's what I'm about to do. And she was a very interesting person, as she is the great aunt of my former partner. That's how I know about her. I had not seen anything about her until he's like, hey, did you know this is my relative? And I was like, oh my God, what a badass. I got to talk about her. I am also pleased that most of this comes from her. Her autobiography, however, is written in the style of an older person's walk down memory lane. It's all sort of like half-connected vignettes that are arranged in roughly chronological order. No themes, no meta-analysis of what's going on, which is fine. Some people don't like that nonsense the way we do. And it feels like, to me, she was one person who was, like, way too busy living it to think about what it meant.
So basically, you're saying that her autobiography is what our podcast is going to be when we're 80?
Yes, that's right. Just a couple minutes on what the cat did this morning. And then I'll remember something from my youth, but then we'll have to insert that a little in a different spot. Yeah, exactly.
It'll be It Chooses You Octogenarian Edition.
Octadish. She had a very rich life that is not at all reflected in her autobiography. There's a lot that you have to imagine, which is fine because I like imagining things. Gertrude, as her real name is Gertrude. Holy shit. Can you believe it? It's true.
Already.
So she got the nickname Cleo because people said she looked like Cleopatra. She had black hair and blue eyes. And so even though her name was Gertrude, people called her Cleo. As soon as people liked her enough to give her a nickname, that's the nickname they gave her.
I need to look at her now. God, she's such a bohemian.
Yeah. She dressed really well. She was tall. She was thin. She read. She traveled with the best music, which traveling with music at that time, who had the money for that? Rum Runners, that's who. She was like a cultural phenomenon, and people loved taking her photo. There's tons of pictures of her.
Did you see this one of her that looks like a Vogue cover in an evening gown? You all have to Google her.
So Gertrude Lithgow was born in Bowling Green, Ohio in 1888. She was the last of 10 children, 6 of whom survived.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Her mother died when she was very young. She doesn't really remember her mother. She was that young.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. But it sort of sets her up for what she did with her life in a way, which you'll see. So when you have a trauma that happens like that often, it will become the deciding factor in many of your choices, I think, and is true for her, for sure. When her mother died, her father sent the 3 younger kids to an orphanage. He's just like, you know what? 6 is too many. I can only handle 3 of you, and I can only handle the ones that are old enough to have jobs.
Well, if 6 out of your 10 children die, then clearly they're disposable, right? I mean, do you think that was the attitude? People did that a lot in those days, too. They're just losing children. Irresponsible. Letting them die. Throwing them to orphanages. Just losing them. Where's Barry? I don't know. Went out for milk.
Fucking interrupted your awesomeness. I'm so sorry.
Hey, we're on separate tracks, baby. I just mute you.
Please mute me. Just mute me entirely. This will be my episode that I just won't speak in it.
It'll just be all my reaction, and I won't edit it at all. It'll just be gaps, and then me reacting.
A bunch of silence, and then you reacting.
This is Cubist podcasting.
Cubist podcasting? How the fuck? So he decided he can only handle 3. The 3 youngest get sent to an orphanage, including one sister who was deaf. She had some sort of illness, and it had caused paralysis of the eardrum, and she couldn't hear. Cleo, and then the 3rd kid, I never learned their names. She didn't mention their names in the autobiography. I mean, she loved them. She worked very hard to, like, see them as often as she could. Family was important to her, but it's just the names of her siblings are not a part of the narrative here. And that's just how that goes. So when these 3 young kids were in the orphanage, an aunt visited them regularly and eventually wrote to their father and said, hey, would you mind if I just take the kids?
Oh, what a good aunt.
And so she took the 3 youngest and moved them to Indianapolis, or she had moved to Indianapolis and then she brought them there. One or the other. They ended up in Indianapolis.
I imagine her as like the aunt from Book. David Copperfield.
The aunt from Book.
Betsy Trotwood from David Copperfield. She's like a wealthy, kind of eccentric, but kind-hearted aunt.
Yes.
That is basically like, I will take you in, I will fund all your dreams, but you're going to be called Trotwood. I'm going to take away your given name because some man named you that, and men suck, and everybody knows that. That's her. That's kind of her. She's great. Betsy Trotwood.
Featuring in a future episode, Aunt Betsy Trotwood. She says in her autobiography that she's like, oh, I'm so glad my aunt took me in, but she really had no idea what she was in for. Because she describes from a very young age, 2 or 3 years old, not really able to make sentences or pronounce words yet, she would just wander away from the property. And they would find her blocks or miles away. and they would go looking for her, and some kind-hearted stranger would have brought her to a public, secure location, and the aunt and the family would come and get her again. So they taught her to say her address, but she couldn't really pronounce it because she was that young, so eventually they literally just tied a tag on her clothes that said where she lived, because helicopter parenting wasn't a thing. They weren't going to try and stop her from leaving, apparently. They're just like, well, she's going to wander, so let's make sure that people know where she actually sleeps.
This child belongs to, if found, please return. Oh my God.
So she's like, I was that way from a really young age, and she's the youngest of a huge family, right? And so, like, nobody has time to clean her. Nobody has time to make sure she's in school. Like, it's just not, she's like an afterthought most of the time.
Yeah, she's the Kevin McAllister to their Home Alone.
She's gonna foil some would-be thieves at some point in this story. Yeah, eventually they're just like, okay, this is how we're gonna deal with it. Here's the tag, like, just bring her back. Great, awesome. Reading that, I remembered, so my grandmother had 8 brothers and sisters. She was Lila, and it went Kyle, Clayton, Norman, Mildred, Henry, Lila, Evelyn, Victor, Vernon. And my Uncle Vernon, my great-uncle Vernon, who was young enough to be my father, because big families, that's what happens, right? Span generations. He was a funny guy, constant attention seeker. Because when you're the youngest, you have to tap dance to get your food, man. You gotta like figure out the ways to keep people interested so you can get your needs met.
Resident funny guy.
That's right. She was a little like that. But because she didn't remember her mother, her entire childhood, she really wondered about her a lot. And she says that she wasn't raised in a very affectionate home. Like, nobody smiled at her or hugged her when she came home. Nobody,
no fucking kidding.
No fucking kidding. Nobody told her about her mother. And it goes back to sort of what you were saying. Like, you have all these kids because you assume some of them are going to die. And, like, you're going to ask your alcoholic father to describe your mother. He's going to be like, well, she was really pretty. And then we got married. And now here you are. And that, that would basically be it. This is not like a culture that's prone to introspection and really thinking about what it is about somebody that you care about. No. Like, I met someone, we wanted to bone, we had to get married to make that happen. Boom, we're married.
Yeah.
Because of that, and because she had never like really met her mother or remember her mother, she became really attached to this idea that she was going to go to Scotland to visit her mother's family because her mother was from Glasgow. She turned out to be very good at playing piano and singing, so good that she was able to earn money as a child doing those things. And she saved up enough money from those performances to pay for her own passage to go to Scotland and visit her mother's family.
So basically, she's a teensy tiny and she's wandering. She's got that wanderlust. And then she gets a little bit older to understand that no one's going to let her wander without her own money. So she's like, all right, well, I need to get on this as soon as possible so that I can legitimately wander.
She's like, no one's going to pay for this, but I clearly have to do it. So I need to figure out how to pay my own way. She traveled from Indianapolis to New York, where she saw the sea for the first time. And as soon as she saw it, she was like, oh, this is what I was looking for. This is it. This is what I wanted.
How old is she about this time?
Teens. She says the first time she saw the sea, she felt immediately home. She's like, here it is. This is the thing. So the trip to Scotland was rough. They had rough seas for several days. So rough that a passenger on the boat actually hit his head against a cornice in a hallway and died.
Ooh.
And so they had to like make a coffin on the boat and like do a burial at sea kind of thing for him.
And then you're stuck on that fucking boat. You can't like leave the room that is frightening you.
That's right. And then there's a ghost on the ship that you're on. But no, she said this amazing thing. She said after we had the funeral, the weather improved, and she understood that it's because the sea had been appeased by the human sacrifice.
Oh, God, yeah.
Makes me fucking love her so much.
Yeah. She's like, Poseidon?
So she visits her mother's people. Her Uncle John really loved her mother. And so when she came to the door to sort of say hello and meet that part of the family, he immediately started crying. And she embraced him and like he saw her mother in her and told her stories about her mother from her childhood. And she got what she wanted. She like learned about her mother in this experience.
Aww.
Very satisfying. She has this experience and she also meets enough people and makes enough friends among family and their acquaintances that she sort of has connections among business people in Scotland now from this very young age. And those connections are going to come in very handy just a few years later when the Volstead Act takes effect and prohibition begins in the United States. So, according to the Ken Burns documentary Prohibition, and as we discussed in the episode Temperance and Axes, Carrie Nation for the win, by 1830, the average American over 15 years old consumed nearly 7 gallons of pure alcohol a year. 3 times as much as we drink today.
Dear God.
Yeah, and alcohol abuse, mostly by men, was like destroying the lives of a huge number of people, particularly in an age when women and certainly children had few legal rights and were utterly dependent on their husbands for food and housing and all kinds of support. So people are like, oh, you know what's a great idea? Let's just ban alcohol. This is genius. And so eventually, something like a 50-year-long movement culminated in 1917, 1918 with the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which banned, quote, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors for beverage purposes. Manufacture, sale, transportation. Those are the 3 things you weren't allowed to do. And this led to the National Prohibition Act, which was called the Volstead Act after the guy in Congress who was the main one who was pushing for it. And it authorized legal action against people who did these things. We know this, and we know this from history, but I'm going to say it anyway. Prohibition was a dismal failure. A failure at all levels. It succeeded only in moving liquor trade out of the hands of legitimate businesses and into the hands of gangsters. That's it. That's all it did. So she had made connections, like I said, while visiting her Scottish family, and among them, there were people who realized that they could make a huge amount of money importing liquor to the United States. But you couldn't do it directly because you weren't allowed to. So we need a third location. We need to figure this out. Because Nassau was a British colony, and because there was a huge amount of sugarcane being grown in the Caribbean, and out of sugarcane, of course, we make rum, which is the cheapest liquor and the simplest liquor to produce. These people who were engaged in the extra-legal, quasi-legal trading of rum for eventual import to the United States against the law were called Rum Runners. She eventually set up an office in Nassau as an importer to the Bahamas of Haig and McTavish whiskey, which was legal. So that's legal. Scotland is allowed to ship alcohol to a British colony, the Bahamas. Okay, so she's fully legal. So, but as we see, like, it's completely legal all around the United States, like you discussed in Plants Are Awesome and So Can You, where you told us about the North Atlantic Vegetable War.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so it's the same idea. It's legal everywhere except for a 3-mile border around the United States and in the United States itself. And so there's all of this legal shipment sort of getting ready, but they can't prove it until you actually get caught on United States territory. Here's how it goes. There's liquor. Liquor has been imported. In 1919, 914 gallons of scotch left Scotland for Nassau. In 1920, 386,000 gallons left Scotland for Nassau. They're like, oh, we can make a huge amount of money doing this. Let's go. So how it would work is you have this liquor. The liquor goes into a big ship. The big ship sails off the coast of the United States. From the Bahamas, it was often New Orleans. It was the coast of Florida or up to Atlantic City in the original Rum Row. The big ship anchors in international waters. Little ships come from the land to the big boat. They make a deal. They buy some liquor. They get it back on land. As long as they do this without being caught, the big ship is not in violation of any sort of law because they're in international waters. Mm-hmm. And the little ships are the ones like running the risk, essentially. This is like, oh, this is a great idea. And for the most, it's possible to do it entirely legally, which is amazing to me and why Prohibition was so ill thought out and ridiculous. So a couple things I thought were really interesting about this whole process is I get excited about the little logistical details of things.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that stood out is that the larger boats would arrange the liquor not in wooden crates, which were really heavy and hard to move and required 2 people, but they would do wee pyramids of 3 bottles, then 2 bottles, then 1 bottle, stacked and stuffed with straw all around and then wrapped in burlap so that one person could lift one with a hand and you could move them a lot more quickly, right? And so they'd sell these bundles in burlap.
You got to be agile in this kind of operation.
That's right. And then I heard stories as well on land. It wasn't that because you had to disguise it a little better than that. It wasn't about being agile. It was about hiding it at that point because it's illegal on land. They would fill up a barrel half full of soap, put liquor in the middle of it, fill it the rest of the way full of hot soap, so that when it solidified, it just looked like a barrel of soap.
And the liquor would stay liquid in between.
Yeah, well, in the bottles, but yes.
Oh, okay.
The liquor would stay in the bottles in between those 2 layers of soap. I just think that's ingenious. I just love that.
I love the workarounds and the ingenuity.
Humans are so clever. I love it. Humans are great for making rules and breaking them. These 2 things we do incredibly well. All of this liquor, like I said, like the import to the Bahamas from England and Scotland exploded in a single year. And the American government complained to the British government, and they're like, hey, what are you doing? And the British government's like, fuck off. And Winston Churchill actually said, Prohibition is an affront to the whole history of mankind. They're like, we will not do anything about it because you are fucking ridiculous.
Humanity has been trying to get drunk since the beginning of our history, and you are denying that rich history of drunken assholes, man.
That's right. Since the rise of consciousness, we have been figuring out how to dull our risen consciousness.
That's right.
Don't try and hamper that. You can imagine, like, the sense that there's so much money to be made now importing liquor to the Bahamas, but really then to pass it on to the United States. I mean, just dollar signs and eyes at distilleries all around the British Isles. But she has these Scottish connections because of her family, and so she ends up being an importer of Scotch whiskey. She has this office set up. She's technically like an agent for a London liquor company. That's her job. She's not an independent operator. She does work for a company. Again, fully legal. She lives in the Lucerne Hotel, which is in Nassau, and it's called the Bootleggers' Headquarters. It's a haven, as some articles say, a haven for shady types, criminals, rogue, colorful characters, and journalists.
And journalists. Well, you know, journalists get all the good shit from the criminals. Come on.
That's right. They're fascinating. If you've ever played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which we have talked about at length in several episodes because I am slightly obsessed with that game, you get a sense of what Nassau was like at the time. So Black Flag is set, 100 years before Prohibition era, but it's the same sort of feeling. It's like, it's the Wild West, but it's the South. It's kind of that. The vibe is the same, right? It's a hotbed of crime and violence. And I think it speaks to her character very highly that she was able to thrive in such a hostile environment. I mean, it's not like these dudes wanted her there. She describes, even like after she arrives, she describes her London office sending someone to help her. And she talks about it being this completely ineffectual guy who was shit-faced when he got off his boat. He had brought a boy with him to help him, whatever she's implying by that. And he basically spent 3 days just drinking in the hotel bar. But because he's male and she's female, when she had to go and apply for the wholesale license, he went as well and he had them just put it in his name. And she's like, I also work here, but she caught him basically in the bar bragging to his friends that she's the typist and he's the one who's actually the thing. So she walked up to him and he's bragging that she's the typist and he's the one who's the actual distributor. And she walked up, she's like, no, the magistrate demands that my name also be on it because my name is on all the paperwork. So you're going to come with me right now and you're going to give that sheet back to the magistrate and he's going to put my name on it. And he, like a dog with a tail between his legs, followed her back to the magistrate's office. The large majority of these liquor importers were male, and of course, they didn't like her. Sexism is real. The potential buyers for this liquor, who were the people who operated the boats that would then go camp offshore to sell it.
Okay, so she's like she's full wholesale.
She's wholesale. She's selling to the people who will actually sail to the United States and do the dangerous part. All of these buyers, they would test her whiskey and it would come up as pure and as good as any of the others. But all of the men who were competing against her for these sales were speaking poorly of her and spreading rumors about her. And so no one was buying from her. And she was in Nassau for 8 months before she made a sale. And her firm was like, what is the fucking... It's alcohol. Everyone wants it. What is the problem?
It sells itself.
When Bill McCoy, the famous Bill McCoy, came to Nassau again, she sent him a note and she said, hey, I will send you samples of my liquor. It is as pure as anything out there. I would really like to subject it to whatever tests you want, but I'm interested in negotiating with you. And so he actually came to her office and met her and they sort of sized each other up. And then he said, yeah, okay, I've heard good things about your liquor and nobody likes you. And basically I like people no one likes. So great.
Because I too am someone no one likes.
Yeah. And so he proposed this deal, her first deal, right, where he would buy her liquor on consignment. She would come with him as the caretaker of the liquor on his boat. It was called the supercargo, and it was the one who was like, if you're selling it on consignment, you send someone with it to make sure they don't just steal it or sell it and steal your money or drop it overboard or do anything like that. So come on board my ship. We will sail together off the coast of New Jersey. You will protect your investment. You will pay me $7 per case for transport. And you have the potential of making somewhere between $45 and $65 a case, right? Because the market's fluctuating like crazy based on the weather and how many boats have sunk and how many policemen are ill that week. I mean, like a very volatile market, but a huge, huge amount of money to be made. And so her first sale was to Bill freaking McCoy.
That's awesome. I just want to point out, too, in case people didn't know, this testing of the alcohol and it being pure is a really important point because it was so common for these criminals to be watering their shit down at this point.
They would water it down with distilled water and prune juice so it would keep the color. And there was a test with some sort of iron tincture where they would drop a few drops into a glass. And if the liquor turned inky black, that meant it was pure. But if it sort of smoked up, got quartzy, or even lighter than that, they knew it had been adulterated. And hers always came up inky black when they tested it.
She wasn't fucking around. She got the pure stuff, y'all.
That's right. In fact, so much so, and like defending that was so important. After she was making sales and after she was making money doing this, at one point people kept saying, oh, she waters it down, she waters it down. She heard about someone specifically who was saying that. She found him at a barber shop where he was having a shave, pulled him out of the fucking chair with lather still on his face, hauled him into her office, threatened him with a gun, and said, if you ever say that again, I will shoot you.
Nice. That's the thing about women in whatever industry it is, trying to make their way in a man's world. Say whatever you want about me, but the work I'm doing is quality. My shit is good.
Well, and she never, of course they were saying bad things about her personally, but she didn't react to any of that because it was irrelevant to her purposes. She was there to make money.
Yeah.
She's like, you can say whatever you want about me, but do not threaten the business I am building.
Right.
I will shoot you.
I get it.
She spent 6 days sailing with Bill McCoy to offshore New Jersey. She hung out with him, anchored offshore for an unspecified amount of time while they sold all of the liquor he had, some of which was hers, some of which belonged to other wholesalers. And then they ferried her to shore in New York for her to make her way back to the Bahamas because he had other things to do, you know.
I'm assuming she's like in her 20s now?
Yeah, she's in her 20s at this point. She was born in 1888, and she was retired by 1924.
So she retired at the age of 36?
Yes, a multimillionaire.
Oh my God. I love it.
Most of the articles reference some sort of romance between Bill McCoy and her, but I get annoyed by that because that's not what it has to be, and why do you have to make it that?
Yeah.
Irrelevant. She talked about being struck by him when they first met, but I'm imagining that has a lot to do with the fact that he took her seriously as a business person, and no one had done that yet.
The man came to my office, and you know what? That shit's hot.
That's right. She's friends with these journalists, and finally people know who she is, and she's followed by paparazzi everywhere, and her life sort of becomes very uncomfortable.
She's still in the business at this
She's
point?
still in the business, and her life is very uncomfortable. She's still making money. She was arrested a lot of times, but she was never convicted because she wasn't doing anything illegal. The people who she sell it to, it's not her responsibility what they do with it after that. So she was never convicted. And she also felt like she was like getting ahead of some sort of curse. And I'm interested in this, and it's in her autobiography, but just a little bit. I wish that someone had drawn this out of her because I really want to know more about this feeling she had. But a couple times she's like, yeah, I knew that I had a jinx on me and that if I wasn't careful, the jinx would catch up with me. And I'm wondering if it has something to do with her sense of like having known the ocean before she was there. And then her first voyage on it caused the death of like that someone died on that voyage. And I have this huge mythology around sailing, as we know, and around the ocean. And so in April 1924, U.S. government petitioned to have its jurisdiction of the waters and the coastlines around the country extended from 3 miles to 12 miles. And at that point, she's like, this is going to be a lot harder. There's a lot more risk on the part of these people. I'm not going to make as much money. This just got a lot more dangerous. And obviously, they're taking it very seriously. And at that point, she's like, okay, I think this is it. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. I'm out. So as soon as that happened, she's like, that's it. I'm retiring. She retired a multimillionaire. She moved back to America. She lived in Miami. She lived in Detroit. And she spent the last few years of her life in Los Angeles, where she died in 1974 at the age of 86. In the wake of her passing, Nassau flags flew at half-mast for days in honor of their fallen queen, which I just love.
Hell yeah, they did.
Yeah, so that's a very quick and dirty story about Gertrude Cleo Lythgoe, Queen of the Bahamas. I mean, she's a great inspiration. And being only 2 degrees of separation from her, my only regret is that I wasn't born until after she was dead.
Cleo, we love you.
She's amazing.
Teresa, thank you so much for that story. What a wonderful character. Thank you all for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and download. Do all the clicky things.
Do all the clicky things. We love you. Thanks for being here. And we will talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.